Welcome to Alternate Readings. My channel's aim is to get listeners to reflect on books and films in ways they may not have previously considered. When applicable to my analysis, I'll draw connections to current events and my experiences with works I've taught, read, or both. Instead of soundbite summaries or so-called hacks, I'd like to entice people to slow down and pose reflective questions about the discussed works so that they may develop interpretations of their own. The texts of my posts are available on alternatereadings.substack.com. I play the music and do the artwork as well. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for listening. Episode 2, Under the Silver Lake and the Traps of Cognitive Mapping. Every scene of David Robert Mitchell's Under the Silver Lake from 2018 is chock full of so-called Easter eggs. But it would be a mistake to try to figure out its many references. I'll isolate one example to prove how daunting this can be. Early in the film, protagonist Sam is lying in bed with his neighbor Sarah, who will become the subject of his subsequent adventure once she mysteriously disappears. They are watching How to Marry a Millionaire, a film from 1953. To the left of the television screen are three Barbie-looking dolls, each one with a name tag and the recognizable ciphers of the infamous Zodiac Killer. Later in the movie, Sam consults a hardcover volume of The Codebreakers, the story of secret writing by David Kahn. The 1967 book is a classic in the field of cryptography and also prominently featured in David Fincher's 2007 Zodiac film, as Robert Graysmith, the main character, is seen reading an identical edition of the book in his attempts to understand the substitution codes used by the killer. Setting aside the obvious parallels of the three main characters in the 1953 film with the dolls, just the references to the Zodiac alone in the space of one or two scenes are enough for years of investigation and critical thought. If people were to tackle the task of understanding the nuances, contradictions, and interpretations of the unsolved Zodiac case, and then turn to drawing meaningful connections to the scenes in Under the Silver Lake, they will either choose to be arrogant enough to assume this is even possible, or honest enough to admit that it can't be done. The wisdom in this instance is about ensuring we are asking the right questions so as not to get bogged down. We have to have the courage to think for ourselves beyond the cultural conditionings of our lives. My sense is that it involves the acceptance of ambiguity. We don't know what we don't know, and as Baudrillard warned us long ago, the reference creates its own reality, obfuscating and destroying the source. We are left projecting our own biases with our limited knowledge, and the more we learn, the less certain we can be. Every clue leads to a larger can of worms. Even if it were possible to identify and source the references of a given scene in the movie, how would a person determine what is relevant in the grand scheme of things? Which symbol, code, or illusion is more important than any other? It is in this spirit that I claim that deciphering the film's multiplicity of codes is not the point. The movie simulates the sea of information that besets our rudderless lives. Looking it all up is entertaining and definitely educational, but the problem is that outside ourselves, there is no reliable context. It's not enough to collect the Easter eggs. How will you learn to think as a result of the experience? Will you take the time to read and do the work just to learn the limitations of your own knowledge? Will you discover that your culture believes things on your behalf without your choosing? For people to have a sense of history and their place in it, a coherent narrative is necessary, one that has a continuity through time. This is precisely what is impossible in our present world, but we need life to make sense regardless. What makes matters worse is that thanks to the internet and social media, we can pretend that films, songs, and literature from different eras coexist in the present in ways that are well beyond their original intent. This has the effect of creating an eternal present that contains various past references, reproduced, reimagined, and repackaged by our consumer culture, which conditions how people project the story of their lives. This is certainly the case for Sam. Without spoilers, let me just say that he has a rather one-dimensional view of women, a consequence of his cultural bombardment, and there's no doubt that this is something else that the film satirizes about our world. So what is a person to do if our media-saturated experiences collapse life into immediacy without depth, details without clear connections? The world is full of mysterious references, but we lack the confident agency of individual thought, the ability to develop coherent interpretations while acknowledging limitations. This is what motivates many of us to strive for the big picture through grand narratives. After all, what could be worse than facing the relentless chaos of a universe that resists meaning? That's why those in power feed us narratives they call the official stories. Skeptics of the official stories are called conspiracy theorists. I don't like the term because it is often unjustly used as a pejorative. It is a convenient way of labeling those who ask questions that most people would rather not think about. Now, Mitchell's film appears to turn its viewers into so-called conspiracy theorists, but he does so satirically so that they learn to look beyond his clever traps. What matters is whether or not good questions are being raised about any given topic. To explore what I mean a bit more precisely, let me refer you to a collection of essays well worth your time. It is Conspiracy Nation, The Politics of Paranoia in Post-War America, edited by Peter Knight and published by New York University Press in 2002. The book gathers several perspectives on the phenomena of conspiracy theory in our culture, but for our purposes, I like to focus on Frederick Jameson's notion of cognitive mapping, a term he didn't coin but nonetheless used to identify the kinds of problems that our friend Sam experiences in the film. Jameson can be a difficult read, but I found a writer in this book who summarized one of his key points. In Chapter 2 of Conspiracy Nation, contributor Fran Mason synthesizes Jameson's definition of cognitive mapping as having two parts. One is, quote, interiorization of social representation that resolves into endless mapping and remapping of the world as a set of textual processes. Instead of providing a map of society, the postmodern text simply provides a map of itself. The second form of mapping stems from the omnipresence of the theme of paranoia in the contemporary world. Conspiracy theory produces an analogy or approximation that is subsequently taken to be real. It generates a map of the world that is actually a map of a different world entirely, a parallel or imaginary world of misrecognized social systems and power structures, end quote. I have cited this segment of her essay as I like the way she condenses Jameson's idea here, for it applies to our film. Let's see if we can understand it more concretely. In his quest to discover what happened to Sarah, Sam does not achieve the understanding of some ultimate reality and his place in it. He simply constructs a projected world as a consequence of his interpretive journey. His cognitive mapping, which is supposed to give him a sense of his place in the real world, results in the creation of a world of his own. Many of the film's scenes are dreamlike and unclear. There is no question that many involve Sam's projection. For instance, the escort ad in his father's Playboy magazine features pictures of the women who were accompanied by the pirate at the movie shown next to the graveyard. The women themselves, in fact, are in the film everyone is watching. None of this makes any temporal sense. Sam met those women in the film's present, presumably, and he's projecting them backwards into a magazine that belonged to his father. So the question is not whether or not his subsequent encounter with the escort actually happened in real life. It's about understanding how Sam is living his reality, his version of cognitive mapping, which constitutes a reality in and of itself apart from the one that the audience may interpret. This is the game that the movie plays. We are invited to ponder its many codes, losing ourselves, if we wish, in its playful illusions, until we ultimately understand that what we are faced with is the question of how to construct meaning in our current world, in the same way that Sam is. This is often at the heart of postmodern art, and it is by no means new. While watching Sam's plight in the film, I was reminded of Thomas Pynchon's mid-60s novel, The Crying of Lot 49. One of my favorite passages mirrors, at least in part, Sam's experience in the film. Pynchon's protagonist, Oedipa Maas, has the following realization on pages 24 to 25 of the novel. Quote, she drove into San Narciso on a Sunday in a rented Impala. Nothing was happening. She looked down a slope, needing to squint for the sunlight, onto a vast sprawl of houses which had grown up all together like a well-tended crop from the dull brown earth. And she thought of the time she'd opened a transistor radio to replace a battery and seen the first printed circuit. The ordered swirl of houses and streets from this high angle sprang at her now with the same unexpected, astonishing clarity as the circuit card had. Though she knew even less about radios than about Southern Californians, there were to both outward patterns a hieroglyphic sense of concealed meaning, of an intent to communicate. There seemed no limit to what the printed circuit could have told her, if she had tried to find out. So in her first minute of San Narciso, a revelation also trembled just past the threshold of her understanding. Smog hung all round the horizon. The sun on the bright beige countryside was painful. She and the Chevy seemed parked at the center of an odd, religious instant, as if on some other frequency, or out of the eye of some whirlwind rotating too slow for her heated skin even to feel the centrifugal coolness of, words were being spoken. She suspected that much. End quote. Sam also seems on the verge of some odd religious instant, forever navigating life's inevitable blind spots in a world that overwhelms people with patterns and the impossibility of fitting them all into a satisfying and meaningful narrative. I must stress in closing that everything I discuss should not be reduced to some cheap notion of relativity, because it is not. It is more of a shared question that we can only attempt to answer if we even learn how to ask it in the first place.